Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV 18 special. We're coming to you from Davos, from the World Economic Forum's annual meeting. Now, the Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman was here representing India. She had a couple of sessions here at the World Economic Forum, reaching out to investors to talk to them about the India story. Now, she believes that India continues to be top of mind when it comes to investments, not just incremental investments from existing investors, but also fresh investments across a bunch of sectors, from manufacturing to electronics. Now, one of the questions asked of the Commerce Minister was about the GST and whether the GST would indeed roll out on the 1st of July. She has, of course, told investors that that is what the government is targeting. A mid-year rollout of the GST looks more probable. Other questions that she was asked were about the reform agenda and whether the government would continue with the reform process that it started when it came to office. So here's my conversation with the Commerce Minister on what she told investors in Davos. Give me a sense of the questions that are being asked of you as the government. Give me a sense of what investors are telling you in terms of incremental investments into India. What can we expect in 2017?
The first thing is investor interest in India is, if anything, more acute now. Every investor, every multinational corporation which is talking about investing, looking at the future, particularly the discussion here is largely centered around how Industrial Revolution 4.0 is going to turn up and how it is going to translate in each country. In all this context, I find the interest in India is widening, and they are keen to know how the government's commitment to the various reform measures that we are taking will be steady
and going forward. Any specific reform measures that they ask you about?
Well, of course, depending on the companies, some would say, look, we would like to have commercial disputes settled early, inverted duty structure, simplifying of tax processes, happy that GST is moving, and also to look at further investment opportunities. So I've had questions about how more can we come into India. Energy is one sector in which many people are asking you.
On the renewable side?
Renewable side. Exploration is another area in which people want to participate in. Electronics and telecommunication is something which most people are interested in. So I find that the investment climate of India is being really appreciated. Ease of doing business, of course, comes up because they're talking with me and they try to ask as to how best we can get into what the Prime Minister has promised. Come within the first 50. Will we keep up the momentum? Will we talk with the states? Will we, take it down further one layer to the local administrations and so on? So the interest is not just at the periphery. Interest is so deep that they ask you questions about details of policy. The question that you might want to ask about, has demonetization had an impact on of them? I was in a panel discussion. I can tell you, everyone who was in the panel, and in the morning and yesterday, the discussions in groups have all appreciated for the bold measure. In fact, several discussions have come as to how other countries are going to look at India based on this. And the motive has been absolutely understood and appreciated. In that, it was an attack on black money. It was an attempt to get 87% which remains in the informal sector onto formal, and leapfrogging into a digital payment mode.
One of your key issues that you had taken up with the Finance Ministry as well as the Reserve Bank was, at least as far as SMEs were concerned, to enhance the limit. Do you expect further relaxation anytime soon?
Today we also had Arundhati Bhattacharya with me, SBI. The kind of line with which all of us are now talking very clearly is that there is definitely now more money with the banks. Money which is cheap money, in the sense it comes through the CASA. And as a result, banks are going to be motivated to lend favorably, particularly to the SME sectors. Now, in the WEF, there's a big component of discussion on promotion of SMEs. Although the definition of an SME in India would be very different from what it is in Germany, what it is in Poland or countries like that. So when the discussion about funding and crediting, providing and extending credit facility to SME came up, when all this has been discussed, for us to say, look, we are now in a better position in a banking sector with such cash, with such money, which can be lent to SMEs.
We've got the budget coming up, and I would imagine that this will be a sector that will, in a sense, be prioritized because job creation is an issue that the government wants to take forward. In that context, then, what are the specific measures that maybe you have recommended to the Finance Ministry for action? Whether or not they happen in the budget is a separate story, but what are your key recommendations?
Many of our ancillary units, which are SMEs, have been approaching me saying, in this day and age where tendering happens and where global tenders happen, the terms and conditions are such, and this is pertinent even to the startups, the terms and conditions of a tender process always starts with, have you been in the business for more than a certain number of years? Is your turnover a certain amount? Those two are sufficient to put out the opportunity for a startup and to throw out any SME. So there is now a definitive call from startups and the SMEs to say, well, all right, we understand global tendering process, we understand e-tendering process and so on, but would you at least look at the terms and conditions of what you put for a tender to provide a level playing field? And it shouldn't look as if innovative as they are, cost effective as they are, they should be held for something which does not characterize them. They can't be big, they can't be forever, and if they are a startup, they wouldn't have been for centuries before. So that's a very big and critical difference.
So
which
are you
we
likely
need
to make these changes,
we are
at
taking
least
it
for
up.
government tenders?
Government procurements. So that is something which I would strongly pitch for. But of course that requires a lot of change, and that has to be consistent with many of the existing tendering understandings that many departments have established for themselves.
Conversations that I was having with CEOs who are part of the renewable energy sector, and one of their demands is that some of the incentives that phase out in 2017, if they could at least be extended to 2022, that would be beneficial for the sector, since this is a sector that the government has prioritized. Do you think that that is a fair expectation, given the fact that the government has made it very clear that exemptions are going to be done away with?
That's right. That's the route in which this government would want to do, because now it's absolutely open terrain for anyone who has the merit, who has the competitive edge for him or her to participate and prove their mettle. So that's not going to be a route. But still, whatever facilitation has to be done so that they survive and manage better, we are looking at sector-wise.
With the Trump administration trying to attract back investment, the promise of bringing down corporate taxes very significantly, what are Indian CEOs telling you about the need to do a radical cut in corporate taxes? And again, is that a fair and a realistic expectation beyond the 25% which is already laid out?
Actually, you'll be surprised that many of them who spoke to me more about GST than about the corporate tax.
Have you been able to give them an assurance that 1st of July it will be for the GST?
Well, the finance minister is putting his best of efforts, and I think inching closer to a solution. And we have this window of opportunity between April and September, going by the constitutional amendment, whatever has happened. So I think July is a fair time to expect it.
Do you think politics on account of demonetization has derailed the GST negotiations?
Doesn't seem so. Although initially it was being used as an argument to say, oh no, we can't afford to have GST post this demonetization exercise. If 92% is being recognized by SBI as having reached that level of normalcy, queues have thinned out, withdrawal limits have been increased. So more than 50 days, you really didn't have severe impact of the demonetization. Not to undermine the long-term benefit it's going to give us. So I don't think GST can be linked up with demonetization.
Do you believe that, some measures, some bold measures perhaps are the need of the hour, which could involve a fiscal stimulus as well?
See, the argument that we had put forth sometime middle of 14 onwards till about 15, that the private sector is yet being cautious, I would think continues even now in terms of expansion on investments, expanding their investing capacities. The cautiousness continues. But the line that we have promoted since this government has come in, that is public sector spend on infrastructure continues. And we have clearly said that that's the way we look at providing impetus to creating better real-time demand in the rural areas. And this momentum on spending on infrastructure will continue. Infrastructure, port development, highways, all of which will receive public money, and in a big way.
The idea of a universal basic income scheme, I understand that it is an option that the government is mulling. Can we expect forward movement on that perhaps as early as this financial year?
Actually, interestingly, I've not had much of a input on that, and I've really not assessed how far the discussions on this is going on. A lot is being said outside, but how much is being discussed inside is unclear to me yet.
Okay, so but it is still a possibility that
it is being discussed here in Davos.
Yeah,
that much I can tell you.
A
lot of discussion on this basic income angle is going on, especially in the light of apprehensions which are being thrown out. Whenever Industrial Revolution 4.0 is being talked about, that many people might get displaced. And if they're getting displaced, to skill them and to redeploy them might itself be such a difficulty. And from now, maybe because of the robotics and other things, production will not be fashioned in the same way as it was all this while, and therefore this debate of why don't we pay, basic minimum to people and so on. I'm not sure that debate is picked up in India yet.
With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC TV 18 special from all of us here in Davos. Many thanks for watching.